Retro.
Hi, this is Claudia Gray, the author of several Star Wars books, and you are listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. May the Force be with you.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we're going to talk about some Star Wars Marvel comics in this episode as we cover the first two issues of the High Republic, Fear of the Jedi. But before we get into the pages of these comics, Jay will remind everybody where we can be found on social media.
Fear not. We are on Facebook and Instagram conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the disc is aligned, the signal is boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So, again, we're going to be discussing Fear of the Jedi 1 and 2. These issues were written by Kevin Scott, with art by Marika Cresta, colors by Jim Campbell, lettering by VC's Ariana Mayer, and the cover work by Phil Noto, the Great, and the book design by Carlos Lau. So, we are getting into the concluding content of the High Republic. And so I can tell you from having read Into the Light, and I am about 3/4 of the way of Charles Soule's Trials of the Jedi, that this is running concurrent to stuff that's we've already talked about or will be talking about in the near future here. But that aside, Jay, what did you think about these two issues overall?
Well, it does what the High Republic does best. It blends personal character drama with really high stakes going on in the galaxy, and it wraps it all up in a really bold presentation. I really enjoyed it. So there's a lot of action, and there's some surprises in here as well. And I have to ask you a couple questions as we get into this, because my memory is not as good on certain things, I think, as it needed to be when I was reading this. And I thought to myself, oh, Dennis will remember, because Dennis has an amazing memory about everything. But you can definitely feel the pressure mounting in these episodes, but also kind of ooh, what's going to come next?
Yeah. There's some things that happen in these issues that I was not familiar with because they happen in the High Republic Adventures that Dark Horse has been
Okay.
putting out. And I have not been keeping up with those. So I was looking at the little editorial notes there. They'd say, see High Republic Adventures issue, whatever the situation. I was like, oh, okay. So that's kind of the blessing and the danger of having this multimedia event that has been the High Republic, is that you really have to dive into everything to catch all the details. But that being said, I enjoyed these two issues immensely. I did not read them as they came out. In fact, I just started reading them today as we're recording this, about a week before this episode comes out. But I have been reading Charles Soule's Trials of the Jedi, and this syncs up very well with what's going on in that book. And the events that are here, and I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil things, are a lot of the stuff that's happening, quote unquote, off screen in Trials of the Jedi. It's stuff that gets alluded to, but we don't get the details of. So this is filling in some blanks for me that I was wondering about from Trials of the Jedi. And because, like, for instance, Keeve Trennis and Skier have kind of only been mentioned in Trials of the Jedi. So now I know why, because here they are doing their thing.
Okay.
So we find out that Keeve has been promoted to Marshal of the Republic Defenses, and she's stationed on the Geos, which is a nice touch. Named after Stellan Geos. Yeah, a Jedi Longbeam or Republic Longbeam cruiser. She's in charge of all these defenses forces, and they're there at the storm wall, waiting for an opportunity to get into the occlusion zone to take things to the Nihil. And in the meantime, they're kind of patrolling this area, defending people from the occasional Nile Marauder that comes across the storm wall to cause some damage here. What did you make of Keeve Trennis and what she and Skier are up to here?
Well, you can tell she's kind of very uncomfortable in her leadership role.
Hmm.
And, I think that some of this is foreshadowing to, as we know, she eventually leaves the Jedi Order, or at least we think she does.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I think for her, she also deals with a lot of fear, and she's dealt with a lot of fear throughout the entire High Republic, and with losing her master and different types of things that have happened to her. And her promotion was kind of driven by urgency, not really her own personal readiness. And I think she's kind of scared, quite honestly. And she's covering a little bit of that up. You can tell she's very uncomfortable with that title and role.
Right. There's a scene in here where she's talking to Avar Chris via Holo because Avar and some other Jedi are getting ready to do a mission that, again, is outlined in Trials of the Jedi. And Keeve would rather be there than here. And Avar says to her, the Jedi Council believes in you. I believe in you. You're here because this is where we need you. And this is kind of like the Avar is arguing against Keeve's own humbleness and all these things.
Hmm.
Keeve doesn't believe that she's worthy of being in this position. And the Jedi Council thinks that she does. And Avar tells her that to her face. But at the same time, it's like Keeve wants to be where she can do the most. So at any rate, so she's there, she's leading this. Real Dairo is on the ship, and she's a reporter that we've seen on and off again throughout the High Republic there, and she's kind of there as this as this correspondent that's covering what it is that Keeve Trennis is. But Keeve doesn't want to be the central figure of what's going on in this effort, and she doesn't want to do the interviews. And so at one point, Skier and Jalen, I think was her name, who's the Republic commander on the Geos, they run an intervention to get her away from the robo camera there. And then they have that meeting with Avar Chris. And when Keeve gets up to like go and kind of like do martial work, Avar is still appearing on the holo cam, and Skier's just kind of sitting there at the table looking at her. And Avar says, you've been pretty quiet, Master Skier. And his response is like, not much a lot to say. We live in interesting times. And his comment is like, Avar is talking about how special and how qualified Keeve Trennis is. And Skier's, of course, her master. And Skier's like, oh, I know it. But the question is whether she realizes it or not. And she clearly doesn't.
Right.
She's again, humble in this regard. She wants to do the right thing. She wants to use her abilities, but she kind of doubts her effectiveness as a leader when it
Hmm.
comes down to it.
That's true. And you mentioned Real Dyro, and I think that that was a brilliant way to mirror Keeve's anxieties,
Mm-hmm.
because it just shows how much Keeve is being watched. She's being judged, she's being almost like mytholized or mythologized or whatever the word is. And so that's always buzzing beneath the surface, I think, for Keeve, is that what if I mess this up, and what if I don't do this right? And but the thing of it is that, like you said, when she's needed to, she steps up and she does what she needs to do. She leads. And she's proof that she can be herself and still be a strong Jedi. She's not trying to be the next Yoda, and she's
Mm-hmm.
just trying to be Keeve, and that's harder, you know, in a
Right.
lot of ways.
Yeah. One of the other conflicts she has to put up with is that when Oberlin gets back to this ship, he brings Master Sababa with him, which is this six-eyed being. I didn't catch what his race is, but we got to see one of these aliens in Solo, a Star Wars story.
Mhm.
And I was not familiar with this character at all, but he was one of the Children of the Storm. So he was a Jedi that was kidnapped by the Nile, and then Baron Bullion did some experimentation on him, and he went around. Basically, the backstory we get is he abducted Force-sensitive children and brought
Right.
them back to Bullion there. And now the Jedi are rehabilitating him, and they send him to the Geos to work with Keeve. and she's not having it. She is not happy about this. It's like one more
No.
piece of stress that she doesn't feel like she should have to put up with here.
Right. Yeah, and she almost in a lot of ways she for lack of a better word, she hates that he's been assigned to that because I
Mhm.
think part of it too is it shows again just the fear that goes into, well, what if this doesn't work out? And what if he is not the Jedi that we need him to be? And what if this backfires on us? And is this going to reflect on me? I don't think she's necessarily thinking that in an egotistical way, but just in a way that she doesn't want anything to fail.
Yeah, I'm not so sure it's reputational as it is. It's like,
Right.
this is hard enough as it
Exactly.
is. And
Yeah.
now you're asking me to babysit this reclamation project. My words,
Mhm.
not hers, on that. And, frankly, through these first 2 issues, he's kind of a model Jedi. He doesn't really give any reason not to trust him. So, I don't know where his backstory is. It's not something I've read. So I don't know if it came out of the High Republic Adventures or what on that.
Mhm.
I can't remember if there was a note in this issue, but yeah, one more thing to keep track of here.
Right.
So while this is happening, we have some scenes on Naboo, which is inside the occlusion zone. It is one of the Nihil strongholds beyond the storm wall. And we've got Lornady and Quinn, who are our redeemed ne'er-do-wells. When the Tempest Breaker audiobook is kind of when we last saw them. And that's when Lornady got her pardon from the Republic. And then she and Quinn set up the Tempest Breakers Guild. And so they're going to do some bounty hunting. But they're there on Naboo looking for Sister Hatar, who is another one of the Children of the Nile that Bullion had done some modifications to. And they are accompanied with Tay Sarek and his droid Scoot. And and then they run into Jedi Master Kelnaka from the Alkalite and his Padawan Garzian Vivel. And again, they're there to try and capture Sister Hatar and do some work towards liberating Naboo. How cool was it to see Lorna again?
Oh, yeah. Always, always very cool to see Lorna, and she's got a new look in this one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I love the way that they referred to, different types of things, like you mentioned Tempest Breaker,
Mm-hmm.
and they would put that in the little boxes like, "Oh, this happened in this or this happened in that." And they did the same thing with, Tay as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about you, but as I was reading Lauren D's lines, I had the voice actress that did her
Yes.
in the audio dramas, her voice in my head. It's like so clearly, and it's so
Mhm.
informed by interpretation of the way she was talking here. And honestly, I can't remember what species Quinn is, but that's not how I envisioned her at all.
No, I know, same because I it took me a second, almost a double take to
Mhm.
think Quinn because there was that little interlude where they were sort of flirting, with each other. And I thought, "Oh gosh, okay, this is Quinn." But yeah, never in a bazillion years did I picture Quinn to look like that.
Yeah, I was she's a Bival, is according to Wikipedia.
Okay.
And I don't know that where else we might have encountered those before. But
Mhm.
I kind of, oh, yes, I do. Okay, we got to see these characters in the Clone Wars and other places. All right, just never one with this coloration.
Okay,
So
there
yeah,
you go.
yeah. But at any rate, you can go check that out on Wikipedia. Maybe I'll try and remember to include a link to that in the show notes for this episode so anybody else can check it out that wants to. But yeah, I kind of enjoyed their banter back and forth. And yeah, as their mission goes on, again, they got Tay Sarek, who one way or another in the High Republic Adventures got pressed into working with this crew here. And he's not particularly happy about it. He goes on to mention about all the different things that he's done. He's been a guardian of the wills, a husband. So I'm wondering if that meant he married Vildar Mac, because we
Yes. Yes, that's
were
what
introduced to the idea in the last High Republic series that those two had a romantic relationship there. Um, but he lost the hand of Cerberus. I don't know what the story is behind that. I'd have to read the High Republic Adventures that, but that's that Sith artifact that he had.
Right,
That
and
was a
that's
big
what I was
deal.
gonna ask you, like, I don't
Yeah.
remember this, now I understand why I don't remember it because we didn't
Yeah,
cover it.
because he acquired it in phase 2 of the High
Mhm.
Republic. I remember that. And then when he showed up in the last volume of the High Republic comics, he had it there and was using it but then something happened in the High Republic Avengers and it got destroyed. Don't ask me how.
Okay.
Don't know. I haven't
Okay.
read those there, but that's what the editorial note was in the comic. And so now he's with Lorna D and Quinn, and he does not like being associated with bounty hunters whatsoever.
This is true.
Yeah. But then, so, they're there in Naboo, and then they run into Kalnaka and Yarzian. And so they agree to work together to go find Sister Hatar. And then they encounter Nihil. And turns out that Sister Hatar has this ability. It's kind of like what the Nameless do. She can generate fear and make them see things. And so, Quinn is seeing an image of Marchion Ro. It's where Lorna D should be. And also, Yarzian thinks that Lorna is a Nameless. And then Kalnaka appears as Lorna D herself, and kind of
Right.
Lorna D, Avar Chris hybrid to Lorna there.
Mm-hmm.
That really threw me off because that's where the first issue ended, and then where the second issue picked up with all of them. I was like, wait a minute, who's this other Twi'lek that's attacking Lorna? I did not get it at first that it was just a past image of her attacking her, kind of like with her own doubts about who she is.
Right, I'm with you because it literally came out of nowhere. Not sort of, literally came out of nowhere. And so I know it threw me for a loop as well, but we definitely got our answer in the second issue. That's for sure.
Right. At first, I thought it was Lorna's sister because we met her in that first audiobook,
Oh, okay.
Tempest Runner. She had that sister, and
Mhm.
then her family all got slaughtered. It's like, oh, did her sister surviving? Because she's talking, because we see this Twi'lek. It's got the similar coloring, but she's wearing an
Yep.
L mask, and she's going on about how Lorna's going to have to pay for her crimes. She walked away from all the. She's calling her by these titles, Princess, Tempest Runner, blah blah blah. And now you have to pay for your crimes or something along those lines.
Mhm.
But then it became apparent real quick in the second issue as she's fighting off this apparition, and the mask breaks, and we see Avar Chris's face on a Twi'lek body, which made no sense at all.
Right.
But and then
Exactly.
it was easy to put two and two together that everyone was seeing these images generated by Sister Hatar. There, again,
Right.
another child of the storm.
Exactly. And you know what I really appreciated about this though is that as you said, it was this almost like a nameless sort of mirage, but in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of ways too, the way that Sister Hatar was able to keen in on everyone's fears, it reminded me a lot of mirroring the whole Jedi cave, the cave on Dagobah, where
Mm-hmm.
Yoda says, you'll only what you take with you. When Luke says, what do I see in there? What do I find? And so that's exactly what they were all finding is their deepest, darkest fears. And so it was very creepy to see how that played out on the page.
Mm-hmm.
And just this weird, crazy hybrid of this priestess person that was modified and is now able to do these kinds of things to people just to
Right.
know
She
that
was
an entity exists.
she was using something called the fear engine that they had
Yeah.
created for her to enhance her fears, and that's how she was kind of overwhelming with this. But she made a mistake in that she had everybody except Lorna fighting somebody else that they were afraid of. Tay Sarek or that could haunt them, and Tay Sarek was getting images of Vildar Mac, who
Mhm.
was mad at him, and Tay didn't get it because Vildar is long gone. And then had Yarzian was confronting a Nameless, but then you had Lorna D confronting herself. And the thing is that we learned in Tempest Breaker, Lorna's already overcome all those self-doubts and fears. She has
Mhm.
those great scenes of the course of that audio drama where she's telling, uh, conversations with Quinn, and then she's confronting Marchion Ro. It's like, Marchion, it's, this is what I know about myself. I've got this past, and I want the galaxy to know who I was so much that I was yelling my name at the galaxy. But no matter how often I did that, people would see this or whatever the situation. She's comfortable with who she is. And so even when, you get this image of Avar Chris, who's someone that Lorna came to admire because Avar extended that hand to her, that you could be better than what you are. You have this opportunity. And Lorna took her up on that. She's, Lorna knew, it's like, wait a minute, this can't be right. I've already overcome all this. And so it was her faith in herself after all this time that allowed her to break down these images that Sister Tatar was generating. And frankly, I wish they had spent just a few more panels on that notion there, given Lorna an opportunity to express that confidence again more deliberately, because I think it was a little bit understated in the comic.
No, I totally agree. And you brought up some really, really great points there for sure. And as you were talking as well, I was thinking more about Sister Hatar and this whole, force engine, fear engine, and the way that all of this psyops from the Nile and everything are happening. And I don't know why it hit me, but it almost reminds me a lot of, remember Vergere
Yeah.
from the Legends line? I loved Vergere. That whole line, that whole story with her and Jason Solo and everything. She was the one, she weaponized fear and illusions, to torture and to try to get Jason to see things that he needed to see. And so I don't know why that just hit me, but I wonder if there was any kind of inspiration whatsoever from Vergere, even though it's a completely different kind of thing, because it's more of that, again, it's Baron Boolin's sort of hybrid between that. But wasn't Sister Hatara Falanasi, wasn't she like a priestess or like a Falanasi witch or something like that she already had some of those innate kind of witchcraft sorts of things, not necessarily the Force, but some sort of Force related?
Let's see. According to Wikipedia, Sister Hatar was a female force-sensitive individual.
So she
She was
was Force
human.
sensitive.
Yeah, who lived during the High Republic era. She was originally a member of the Falanasi and a bounty hunter. She was eventually found by Baron Bouillon and the Nile Marauders and experimented upon to become a member of the Children of the Storm, capable of inflicting visions of others' fears. Now a Jedi hunter, she sought out force-sensitive children for Bouillon's experiments. And then, we got to see her when she was hunting that Yacombe girl back on
Yes.
Indus. So, so that's where we've seen her before. Now, they finally get their final confrontation with her, but in the fear engine, she's kind of exposed when it came down to it. So, to me, it's like, clear. I mean, it feels like Baron Bouillon, really enhanced her abilities because he also did experimentation on the Nameless. So, by enhancing them with other organic beings. So I wonder if the reverse happened with all of that. So, but so after this confrontation, the Naboo have risen up against the Nile on that planet, and you've got the Stormwall goes down, and we don't know why. Not from this comic, but you will find out in Trials of the Jedi how that happened.
All right.
How the Stormwall goes down, and so Keeve brings her fleet there, and it's not much of a fight. And the Nile, at first, they think they're retreating, but then it turns out that General Weiss has summoned them to Eriadu because there's a big battle going on there. And so the celebration at Naboo is short-lived. Kelnaka and Yarzian are staying behind to help with kind of the relief efforts there in Naboo. But, Marshal Keeve Trennis is taking the fleet to Eriadu to help with the fight that's going on there. And let me tell you, we're in for something there, because that is a huge part of Trials of the Jedi, and a lot happens with all of that. Yeah. And the next 3 issues of this focus, as best I can tell, on the Battle of Eriadu, which of course is also the homeworld of Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yes, it is.
So
yes, it is.
There are Tarkins in the High Republic. So, we met some of them back in Light of the Jedi. We met one of Tarkin's ancestors, because when the emergence happened after the Great Hyperspace disaster, Eriadu was one of the planets that was impacted. And then the Tarkin led.
Tarkins?
What's that?
Did they mention Tarkins? I don't remember that.
Yeah, one of the Tarkin led clan captured some of the Nile and did not treat them kindly at the time. So,
okay.
You'll see the Tarkins again.
I don't know why I don't. That's not something I recall, but
it was like 3 years ago too. So it's not been a recent reading.
See, that's why I depend on you, Dennis. You always have the best memory for stuff.
Well, I've read Light of the Jedi 3 times now, so I did benefit from that as well.
That's awesome.
And yeah, I'm loving this series, Jay. I really like how this is all coming together here. The High Republic has been such a great ride, and this is not disappointed at all.
Yeah, and I'm so excited that it seems like it's very timely that we've chosen to dive into these, especially with Trials of the Jedi, as you
Hmm.
said, and all of the great tie-ins there too. So, yeah, and I have to say, boy, they really showed that Naboo got pretty devastated by
Hmm.
this whole thing. And so to see how it was later rebuilt, and then obviously when we get to see it in the Phantom Menace, they did a lot of work.
Yeah, well, they had 100 years, so they
True that.
played up to restore the whole thing. But right, so yeah, going forward, we're going to be gradually wrapping up all of our High Republic coverage. I think up next we're going to be discussing Into Light from Claudia Gray. Well, I don't know what's next. We may actually get to the last 3 issues of this comic series before then, but we got those. We're going to get into the Light. That was kind of clumsy the way that came out. By Claudia Gray. That's a big Re-Silas story and happens on Kashyyyk. So that's coming up in the next few weeks, and then we'll be wrapping everything up with Trials of the Jedi. And so if you've enjoyed the High Republic at all, make sure you stick around and catch those episodes with us. And with that in mind, thanks for joining us for this episode and our discussion of issues 1 and 2 of Fear of the Jedi. And go ahead and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already, so you can get our upcoming discussions of the High Republic. If you haven't been running, even if you haven't been reading it yourself, stick around for our discussion. This is a fascinating era, and maybe after you've kind of heard our discussion, you'll be inspired to go check out some of it for yourself or reach out. I know I've heard from several people that wanted recommendations about where they should go after they've read some of the novels or some of the comics and what they need to read next. And there's a great episode guide on StarWars.com right now that can help you out with that as well. But once you've subscribed to the show, please rate and review. We'd really appreciate your 5-star review. That really helps others find the show. And then you can head over to retrozapp.com for our entire catalog of shows beyond the 100 or 200 that are likely to be on your podcatcher right now. Jay, you will go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are.
Absolutely. And those were some really great recommendations for some High Republic material as well, because as you know, we both do, I share a love of the High Republic. And so, I've always been trying to tell people to check it out. And you can also check out our social media outlets on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust, as well as all of our Pinterest boards and all of our YouTube outlets as well. So we have the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube music and no videos, but you can watch a static picture that Dennis always does a great job picking out, and you can leave us comments and you can rate us and you can share those with other people too, which we would absolutely love. And then we also have our TeePublic store, and the link to that is in our show notes. So you can find all kinds of things for everything Podcast Stardust, from apparel to home goods and everything in between. So whether you are in need of a closet refresh or maybe a home goods refresh, you can head on over to that link in our show notes.
All right. Where can everybody find what you're doing with cosplay?
All right. Well, you can find me on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And so you can catch me as Ahsoka, Hera, the Fourth Sister, also the original concept Mandalorian that I did based on Tahiri Vela and Leia Endor, and many, many more things, both Star Wars and non-Star Wars related. So kind of taking a little hiatus right now for the summer and getting some other things done, but I am working on improving a few things, and I will be back at it definitely come this fall.
Okay, so upcoming on the show on Friday, we'll be getting into the weekly edition of Star Wars News. And if there isn't any, then Jay and I'll come up with something fun to talk about in its place. And then on Monday, we are back into the Clone Wars with a look at episode 12 from season 2. So make sure you stick around for that. With all that having been said, thanks for listening to episode 910, the Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Until next time, for Light and Life, and may the Force be with you.